Hey everybody, I hope you guys are healthy and safe. So you're watching footage shot of the main camera of the iPhone 14 Pro Max right now. I have the phone on a selfie stick, so it's slightly extended further out than my usual arm's reach, but it is just a dumb selfie stick. It is not a gimbal or anything. Despite that, and the fact that I'm shooting at night right now, stabilization should be pretty good because that's always been the strength of the iPhone's video capabilities. But beyond that, Apple introduced a new electronic image stabilization mode called Action Mode, which further improves stabilization. For Action Mode mostly works during the day because you need a lot of good lighting for it, but I've tried it at night and it still seems okay. Maybe because Hong Kong is pretty bright for nighttime, but let me turn it on right now. If I'm breathing heavy, it's because I'm walking up a slight hill right now, and also I'm out of shape. Okay, I have Action Mode enabled now. It's a tighter crop than before, but you should get better stabilization now, even if I kind of run a little bit. And keep in mind, again, Apple suggests you use Action Mode in good lighting, and I'm using it at night right now, so it could be a lot better if I shoot during the day. The sound you're hearing is not coming directly from the iPhone though. I do have the iPhone connected to a Bluetooth wireless mic right here. Okay, I've switched off Action Mode, so it's back to just normal mode with the main camera. So in this iPhone review, I'm obviously, as you can already see, take a different structure from all the other reviews out there. There's really not much point in me going over the specs, talk about display resolution and all that, because most of you guys already know. And second, if you don't know, a 9-second search on Google will show you all the information you need. And number three, Apple itself has never cared about numbers. Like, Apple doesn't care about how much RAM is in the phone, or what's the size of the battery, or even display resolution. So there's really no point in the review to go over that much. You just need to know that everything works pretty damn well. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit more about Dynamic Island. I already talked about this in my first hands-on video, where I said I really like it because I think it's great that Apple designed a UI that plays into the hole punch to kind of take advantage of what is supposed to be a flaw. A lot of people in the comments disagree. They think the Dynamic Island looks ugly. They think the cutout takes up more space on the notch. And you know what? Fair points, man. Ultimately, this is all opinion. The Dynamic Island, at least right now, it's not going to make or break an iPhone usage experience unless you really care about aesthetics. So for the most part, it is like a superficial thing. But I do want to bring up that I'm pretty sure all you guys who diss the Dynamic Island now also made fun of the notch like 4 years ago and said, oh, I would never buy a phone with a notch. You know, maybe you did not. Good for you, man. But most people did, because go to any major cities in the world, whether it's like Hong Kong, Tokyo, New York, London, you're gonna see iPhones in more than 60% of the population. And guess what? Almost all the iPhones nowadays are notched iPhones. Ain't nobody buying the iPhone SE. Ultimately, the Dynamic Island is here to stay. Okay, now that we got the Dynamic Island out of the way, we can talk about the iPhone as a phone. Basically, this phone doesn't change how I feel about Apple and iPhones in general. I think the iPhones have always been the most polished smartphone in the industry, with the best app ecosystem and just really awesome synergy between all the Apple devices. Like, if you own an iPhone, it just plays so nice with your MacBook, iPad, stuff like that. For example, when I set up this new iPhone and I took it to one of the coffee shops I usually go to, I didn't need to put in the Wi-Fi password again because my MacBook had connected to that Wi-Fi like 7 months ago, and the iPhone just automatically connected. Or the fact that if I record a voice memo on this iPhone, that voice memo will be available on my iPad or MacBook like immediately. But at the same time, a lot of stubborn shit that Apple does, Apple still does with the iPhone 14 Pro Max. Like, I've always thought the iPhones were unnecessarily not one-hand friendly. Like the fact that you have to swipe all the way from the top of the screen to bring down the notification panel or the control center. On a Pro Max iPhone, it's just way too big to do that action. And yeah, I know there's reachability, but it's just not as convenient as Android phones where they let me swipe down from anywhere. Conversely, despite the fact that the Pro Max iPhone screen is so big and so wide, Apple still locks us to a grid in which we can only put 4 apps horizontally. Like, why can't I put 5 or 6 apps on my dock? Why am I stuck with 4 when the screen is so damn wide? And then there are things like the photo widget, the official Apple one, where you have no say in what photos show on that widget. It has to be a random order. And to be honest, sometimes it's cool. Sometimes the widget will show an old photo from 5 years ago that I have forgotten about and bring back like a fond memory. Like, oh, remember 5 years ago when I did this. But there are other times when they'll show me a photo that it's kind of embarrassing or I don't really care about. Like it might be a picture of like my toenail or like a picture of a receipt from CVS that I took 4 years ago when I was in San Francisco. Like, I don't want to see that, but I have no choice. If I want to use the Apple widget, that's what I have to deal with. And that sums up the whole Apple experience, right? They have control over everything. You just have to accept it or not. So let's talk about the camera. So Apple made a big deal about the new 48 megapixel camera. And initially I was a little bit underwhelmed. I took a lot of photos side by side with the iPhone 14 Pro Max and the Xiaomi 12S Ultra. And I thought the Xiaomi 12S Ultra still produced better photos with more depth and a little bit more dynamic range. And that is still true for the most part. If I'm shooting a really challenging scene, I still think the Xiaomi 12S Ultra has a higher ceiling because it has a larger sensor. However, I was short-sighted because that's just one category of many aspects of a mobile camera experience. I just focus on still photography with the main camera, but there's also video performance, ultra-wide camera, and overall cohesiveness between all the lenses. And over the past 7-8 days of using the iPhone 14 Pro Max, I was blown away by how seamless all the lenses play together. For example, look at this video. I'm zooming in and out, and I'm blown away by the fact that the transition is seamless between all three lenses. And also the fact that even when I'm filming a video at like 6-7 times zoom, it is completely stable.
Let's hit the dance floor. Don't work too hard, my break a backbone. Return of the Mac, the king is back though. Corvette and cash, I never lack those. She saw the stone, you know how that go. Fatality, my diamonds that cold. Versace trunks, I hit my backstroke. Knock on the door.
Well, the action mode that I talked about earlier. Look at how stable action mode is right here, even though I'm running full speed at my friend. The iPhone has always been the best at video cameras, but I think Apple has widened the lead a little bit more this year with action mode and the improved zoom. Now, if you're wondering, why is it improved zoom if the 3x zoom lens is exactly the same? That's because Apple is using that 48 megapixel sensor to do a somewhat real optical 2x zoom. This trick is not new. A lot of Android brands have been doing this, but no other Android brand has been able to do a digital zoom in video form as good as Apple. So the other area that I think iPhones have always been good at is portrait photography, and once again, I am really impressed by the portrait shots I've been able to snap with the iPhone 14 Pro Max. Another video mode that's pretty fun but not perfect is cinematic mode. That's basically portrait mode for video, and it will add artificial bokeh around my head. And for the most part, I think it looks pretty good if you lower the strength of the blur. Like, you don't want it at the maximum strength. If you lower a little bit, it looks pretty good. So ultimately, I would sum it up like this. If I need to snap some photos of a Hong Kong skyline at night with a lot of neon lights, city shots, I would still prefer to use like the Vivo X80 Pro with better HDR or the Xiaomi 12S Ultra with the largest sensor. But if let's say I'm going on vacation and I can only take one phone with me to do everything, videography, photography, portraits, then I have to take the iPhone 14 Pro Max because it can do everything. Although the Galaxy S22 Ultra would be a very, very close second. Okay, and then we're talking about performance. The Apple A16 Bionic is a more powerful chip than anything in Android. So if you go by benchmark numbers, it beats the Qualcomm Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1 pretty badly. But to be honest, that doesn't really matter, because we're at a point where mobile silicon has gotten more than powerful enough for most people. So like, you know, for 90% of people, if you're just using Instagram, sending emails, like a Snapdragon 888 from a year ago or Apple A14 Bionic from 2 years ago will be good enough. You don't need the absolute most powerful chipset. However, it is nice to have them. It's good for bragging rights, and it's good for future proofing. You know that the chip in the iPhone went out, it's gonna be still as powerful as whatever chip is in Android phones next year. So what I just said only applies to casual users though. If you are a power user, if you do graphics work on your iPhone for some reason, or you edit and export videos, the A16 Bionic is really awesome because it is just so fast. For example, so I use the Insta360 camera quite a lot. It shoots 5.7K 360 videos, so it's a pretty large file size. And when I render and export on the iPhone 14 Pro Max, it just comes out so much faster than doing the same rendering session on an Android. It's not even close. I don't know how this footage is looking out because I am on a moving tram now. Ultimately, like I said, the iPhone 14 Pro Max doesn't change my views of iPhones before. I've always thought the iPhones were the most polished and the most powerful smartphones around. However, I still choose to use Android phones because I like to customize my UI. I like variety in my design. I like foldable screens. And I like cameras that really pushes what's possible with camera hardware. I'm still jumping back to the Galaxy Z Fold 4 because Z Fold 4 has an awesome foldable screen and a UI that lets me run 2 apps at the same time. Ultimately, I would phrase it like this. If you've never been impressed by the iPhone's seamless ecosystem or iOS or any of the Apple features like AirDrop, iMessage, this new iPhone is probably not going to change your opinion. Just like it didn't change mine, I'm still going to use my Galaxy Z Fold 4 over the iPhone. But if you have always preferred iPhones, then the iPhone 14 Pro Max is the best iPhone in quite a while. This is a bigger jump over the 13 and the 12 than the 13 and 12 was over previous generations, in my opinion. So anyway, that's about it for this review of the iPhone 14 Pro Max. I hope you enjoyed this video. I know my videos are a little bit different in structure from everybody else. Part of it is by necessity, but also part of it is because I like to shoot videos that are a little bit different. So if you enjoyed this, please give it a thumbs up and please subscribe to my channel. I have a lot more content coming up. So that's it for now. Thanks for watching.